get out into the community and to help solve problems before they became bigger problems. The task force was responsible for identifying and addressing power company shortfalls, transportation availability and movements, and locations for distribution of other assets. This is the first time members of the utility industry were formally recognized as first responders in a natural disaster. In an unprecedented display of private-public partnership paradigm we are advocating, the Department of Defense orchestrated the airlift of over 350 power restoration vehicles and almost 450 technical personnel on 64 different missions from California, Arizona, Washington, all to Stewart Air National Guard Base in New York to accelerate power restoration in hard-to-hit areas. And even with that Herculean effort, it still took time to restore power to those that were in need. While there are a number of other innovations during Sandy, I'll stop there because this day is really about your opportunity to share. But I want to know some of the highlights that reinforce why what you do is so important to not only our national security, but also our resilience. Our collective challenges continue to be how do we make the most effective uses of the limited resources we have in our communities, in the private sector, and all levels of government. And it's absolutely true, the Secretary can tell you this, that absolutely our resources are constrained. Our thinking need not be. One of the models that I'm a pretty simple guy for those of you that know me, one of the models that I think makes sense in complex catastrophes, disasters, and other things is this notion of Legos. And Legos represent capabilities. And you put them together in such a way as to build a dump truck if that's what you need. That's what you get out of it. If you need a dinosaur, you use the same capabilities and put them together in a different way. At the time that it happened, nobody in the world, to my knowledge, had on the shelf a plan that said how you rescue 120 people from the wings of an airplane in the middle of the Hudson River in January. The plan didn't exist. The capabilities existed. The guy that was driving the ferry boat that morning had no idea that he would be part of a rescue mission for people trapped on the wings of an airplane in the middle of the Hudson. The mission was executed brilliantly in absence of a very detailed and coordinated plan. It was a recognition that capabilities existed and needed to be leveraged in such a way as to achieve the outcome that we were seeking. So again, we don't have to be too complicated or fancy about it. It's really about how do we leverage one another, how do we innovate on the fly, how do we maintain true to our principles and core beliefs, and yet at the same time maintain some flexibility. So as you already know, given your work across so many disciplines, the solution to a more secure and resilient nation doesn't lie in the hands of the federal government. It will take government at all levels, industry partners, critical infrastructure owners and operators, nonprofits, the general public, the academic community, all rowing in the same direction for us to continue to enhance our security and our resilience. So I look forward to the continued innovation and creativity that you all bring to this effort, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks, Richard. I really appreciate it. And as mentioned, a couple of things I'm just going to pick up before I go up. Some of the quotes, just you already picked up on Twitter land, okay? Richard, one of the things is Lego from M. Kelly. Legos represent capabilities stacked together to make things work together. Awesome. Good quote. Also, another one was, I'm not sure what this one actually meant. Since Moby Dick was a minnow, but appreciate it. And just for a moment, this is one of the pauses that we have to take. I have to turn the call over to Alexander Woodruff from the National Advisory Council. We have to do this each and every time. We have to share a very important message from our lawyers.
Sorry guys. The purpose of the Fema Think call is to seek individual viewpoints from a broad and diverse spectrum of stakeholders. FEMA is not looking for group or consensus recommendations and will not be making any decisions on agency positions or policies during the call. Although specific companies may be mentioned during the call, FEMA does not endorse any non-government entities, organizations, or services.
Thank you for a message from us. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. So again, just some quick reminders for folks. If you're online right now, and I know a number of you have, just for information, we currently have over 720 people on the call, and it's climbing. And if you're online, please feel free to participate. Again, hashtag Fema Think Tank. If you're on the conference line, you wish to ask a question, press *1 and you'll be placed in a queue. If you're captioning link and you wish to make comments, ask a question, send us an email, fema-think-tank@fema.gov.dhs, and continue the conversation throughout the call at www.fema.gov/thinktech. As we, during the response to Sandy, we developed an innovation team to New York to assist in the disaster response. Quite often, innovation is looked at, it's thought really of tech, like design, and really not in government and not for government, and sometimes there's a little bit of bureaucracy in government. Some of you may have noticed we do that sometimes pretty well. However, innovation really doesn't include just technology solutions, but also non-technology solutions. It's forward-leading, solution-oriented, and that's the approach to emergency management that we'd like. I'm going to ask people if they can put their phones on silence. That would be helpful of you. And with us today, we have the 3 subject matter experts to kick off the first part of this that'll provide a brief perspective on innovation from 3 very different points of view. First will be Brian Ford, Senior Advisor to the U.S. Chief Technology Officer here in the White House, the Office of Science and Technology. Next is Bill Bryan, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Department of Energy. He'll discuss innovation throughout the interagency as innovation. And I got to know Bill very well. He was one of the group that was in a Suburban that was driving around New York for about a while. And we also had somebody from the National Security Staff at the White House and Major General Deputy Commander in Northcom. So we're driving around in the car for a while, looking at issues. And then we'll have Dr. Lenny Marcus, the Director of the National Pearson Leadership Initiative at Harvard, and he'll discuss the importance of leadership encouraging innovation. Now I'll turn it over to Brian first for an overview, and then we'll go. Thanks.
Hey guys. When Hurricane Sandy hit, the technology community responded. Many of the emails I've received came from folks in this room and people on the call. And we were just blown away at the White House by how many emails we received from the tech companies across the country. Immediately, we found out that there were 800 developers who stood ready to build anything that we needed to help survivors, which is just fascinating. If you kind of reframe that, that'd be like taking the engineering resources of a Twitter or a Facebook or a LinkedIn or some other upstart technology company and saying, what can we do to support any of the survivors? And that's just a phenomenal way to think, and something that I'm not sure we were necessarily exposed to, but we were certainly ready for. And with the help of Willow, there was over 10 hackathons that were started up around the country to support all of the efforts in terms of the response to the recovery. But in addition to that, there are high schoolers. Several high schoolers from Franklin High School in New Jersey they were on Twitter Watch, and they started crowdsourcing all of the feedback that was coming from them on Twitter so that they could map all of the information about which gas station was open and closed and what services they had. And then with the help of Presidential Innovation Fellows, they were able to take that information, open source it, and share it with Google Crisis Maps, who we know is one of the most popular applications that was tapped for information from survivors and the federal government. And so we were just so amazed by all of the fantastic work. And in addition to that, Airbnb set up a fantastic website to help survivors find housing for those who were displaced. And WalkScore, a fantastic technology company, figured out a way so that you could enter in, if you're a displaced survivor, your address and your new address where you would live, so you could find out what's the new walking distance or transit time to your office or to your children's school, to make it easier for them to make that decision. And so we're really excited about all of the momentum that's been that's come from the technology community and the innovation space. And that's why yesterday we were excited to announce that the Department of Energy will be having a Technology Disaster Presidential Innovation Fellow. And And so I know we have 400, 500, 600 people on this phone call. We have 60 amazing candidates in this room. So I would just encourage you to go to whitehouse.gov/innovationfellows to apply for that position, because we're going to need your private sector insights and your on-the-ground experience to come into the federal government and work with HHS and FEMA and HUD as they put together the next plan for using technology in the next disaster. So that was whitehouse.gov/innovationfellows. Thanks, Rich.
Okay, thank you. And now, Bill?
Sure.
Bill Bryan, the Deputy Assistant Secretary from the Department of Energy.
Thank you, Rich. And thank all of you. What a great cause to be a part of. I got closer to any event, even though I've been doing this for a long time. I've never been as close and on the ground and up front and personal with the response until Sandy occurred. And just my own personal innovation that I experienced, I was actually MVTC with Secretary Napolitano when I received a motion to step out of the room for a second just before I was supposed to brief her. And for the White House, and we have 10 minutes to get to the airport, and then Cooper Sereno over here flying out to the region. And the only thing I had with me was my bag that I commuted with. So I want you all to know that's why I brought my bag. You never know when I had a meeting with the Secretary of Sereno, I ended up going somewhere. But I did bring it with me. But I was part of a very unique, innovative team, as Rich described. And I got just a couple of anecdotal stories on how that team played out. As we were driving around, looking at things and kind of putting eyes on the ground and validating and verifying some of the information we were receiving, the White House liaison in the vehicle we were in leaned over, tapping on the arm and said, "Bill, you got to get to Colts Neck, New Jersey." And I said, "Why do I have to go to Colts Neck?" And they said, "Well, we don't know. You need to go figure it out." So I go to Colts Neck to find out they had a unique problem, and that it wasn't a large city. They had like 13,000 folks, but they're all on septic. And because they were large, the property was pretty large, these septic tanks had to have pumps to move whatever. So they had a potential health hazard looming, and the utility company wasn't paying any attention to them because they only had 13,000 people, and they were shooting for large numbers. So we were able to get utility crews into that city within 12 hours. Power was restored to that city within 36 hours, and things were back to normal. But the interesting thing is when I asked the mayor of Colts Neck is, how did you even get on my radar to come out here and visit you? And he said, well, it was simple. The president told all the mayors that if you have a problem, you can solve it, call the White House. And so that mayor took him up on it, called the White House, and that's how that word got through the liaison to me to go to Colts Neck. Talk about innovation. It works. And there are more stories than that. I'll tell you to compliment what Brian said about Google Maps. I was going to another city in New Jersey, heavily devastated. There were a lot of concerns about how we're going to get in and out of this place. And I relayed that back to the team in Washington. Next thing you know, the innovative team, I got this map instantly from Google showing me an overhead of the best path to get in and out of the area we're going into. It was just amazing. Never seen it that fast before. It was just amazing. But I gotta tell you, if we knew, if our predictability was so good, and we knew that an event was gonna hit us, that would take out 100% of our offshore drilling in the southeast, 80% of our refining in the southeast, and kill electricity, the landmass the size of 3 states. If we knew that, guaranteed, going into an event, I can assure you there would be panic. That's exactly what we experienced at Katrina. Right? And it took about 4 months to recover from the energy side on Katrina. 4 months. Ike and Gustav hit 3 years later. It took us very similar impacts, but it took us 2 months to recover. Why did that happen? There were some innovative solutions regarding resiliency and recovery that industry was able to adopt. Not all, but some. And these are the kind of lessons learned that we have to take and spread out more broadly to those parts of the country who recently, well, I should say in the past, haven't had to experience the degree of storms that we have seen in the southeast. We're seeing more and more of these at a higher degree throughout the country. And so we need to take some of these solutions and best practices and take them to other parts of the country. And there were 3 systemic things that occurred again this time that we've seen in the past and that we really need to look at some innovative solutions to solve. One of those is preparedness. Okay, preparedness. Community, as much as we push preparedness, we really weren't ready for this. Some utilities were not ready for this. Some were, some were not. So not all utilities are created equal. All right. The second one is situational awareness. And that is situational awareness from our end, especially on the fuel side. Especially on the fuel side. Who had fuel, who didn't have fuel, where are the bottlenecks in the fuel system. And unlike the electric utilities who own a piece of real estate, and they have control of power of that real estate, and they can make decisions on that real estate, the oil industry is very different. There are a lot of segments to it. And we have to try to bring that together to get a good visualization on the bottlenecks and predictability of where the fuel supplies are and what their current status is. And we are identifying technology right now and links and data feeds that will give us that. We already have a tool we've developed at the Department of Energy called Eagle Eye, which is our visualization tool. And this feed, hopefully for next season, we'll be able to have this data feed coming in and we'll have better visualization on the fuels. The second piece of situational awareness is the utilities communicating that to their customers. It's one thing for a community to know that a substation is going to be repaired in 24 hours. If they don't know what that substation powers, it doesn't do them any good. And some utilities are better than others at identifying that. But these are situational awareness and communicative tools that have to be in place for communities to make decisions on where to put water, shelter, so on and so forth. So we plan to work with the utilities to do this, come up with some innovative solutions. Number one, to get that information to the customer, and number two, to open up that communication link so those channels are wide open. How do you communicate that? If we do get these data feeds coming into our system, what's the best way for us now to turn around and communicate that back out to the folks who need to know that information? So we're looking forward to working with the interagency, working with the White House, to come up with some innovative solutions as we go forward to meet future disasters. So this is certainly an honor to be here, and I want to thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bill. And next part of this segment, then we'll take some questions. Dr. Leglack.
Thanks a lot, Rich. Well, we up at Harvard at the NPI, the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative, study leaders during events. And during Sandy, we deployed, and I have Dr. Isaac Ashkenazi here with me and Eric McNulty, we deployed to study leadership. And one of the questions that we asked was, why was there innovation during the Sandy response? So always a teacher, take out a piece of paper. There are 3 different factors in this formula. The first factor was evolving organization. Think of the old legacy organizations, and in legacy organizations, very strict lines of decision making, very strict lines of communication, and very, very clear rules that limit capabilities to be flexible. Among the legacy organizations, we find some clear adaptation and flexibility. And the other thing, reaching out to the innovation team where communication was very, very open, very, very adaptive, very responsive, without real clear rules of how communication was going to emerge and how it was going to move. So the first factor was adaptive, flexible organization. Plus, the second factor was leadership. The president had his cabinet meetings during Sandy at FEMA headquarters with the clear directive, collaborate across all of the agencies. That directive went out to the agencies, went out to the field, went out to the local level, and even went all the way out to the innovation team. And what the innovation team was able to do was take the information that it was putting together and all that was coming from the field and bring it back up, as Richard said, right back to the White House. Now, we call that kind of leadership meta leadership. It's transformative leadership. It's leading up, down, and across, and really bringing in situational awareness that otherwise wouldn't have been there. So the second factor, leadership. The third factor was motivation. And in our study of events, there are many things that motivate people during an event. Sometimes people are concerned about political considerations. Sometimes there's denial. Sometimes people are concerned about their own career. One of the things that we found fascinating about the Sandy response is the motivation really lined up. Everyone was really clear that we're here to help the people in the field. We're here to help their survivors. So evolving organization, leadership, and motivation equals innovation. And if we're going to start thinking about how we can build innovation into the future, we have to be looking at those factors. Now, in the middle of the event, I had a chance to meet up with Desi Mattel Anderson, who's certainly a lot of the reason we're all here together here today. And I asked Desi a question then, and it's a question that we have to be thinking as we're going forward. Think of an equation. At the top of the equation is productivity. Underneath is activity. And you want that in that equation to have very, very high productivity with as little activity as possible. And what's fascinating is there are only very, very few FEMA staffers that were assigned, so very, very small activity, and yet they were able to produce very, very high productivity. And I think one of the questions that we asked in the middle of the event, and we have to ask going forward, is how do we ensure there's very high productivity during a disaster, during an event, with minimal activity? Because resources are always limited. And you always want to help as many, many people across as wide an interface as possible. So as we're thinking about innovation, how do we keep productivity high, recognizing limitations on activity? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lenny. And I think that, listening to the three different presenters just now gave three different distinct views of looking at this from, an energy side, looking at it from technology, and also looking at it from the leadership. And for the people in the room and people on the phone, now's an opportunity. If people have any questions, for people in the room, there's a microphone over here to the left by the door. You can go over there and ask a question so other people can hear it. And if anybody online has a question, we've been looking at Twitter, monitoring that, or you can press *1 as well. And we'll take a question. Operator, is any questions for you?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. The first question is from Lee Curzon. And Lee is from the cafeteria. Your line is open, sir.
Okay, yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I spent some time up in the Red Bank and Brick area, New Jersey, as a case management team. And talking to families there, and one in particular, there were 3 children, parents living in a hotel. Of course, FEMA was taking care of that at the time of the hotel. The question came up, and they knew the area much better than myself, but it made a lot of sense that possibly they knew of in the area where there was, and it happens today quite frequently, where you see military bases closed, government facilities that are closed that are already infrastructure that could be fitted to accommodate these people on a recovery effort. Is there any thoughts towards that direction?
Sure. This is Rich. As a matter of fact, that was done specifically in New Jersey. I can't remember if it was Monmouth, New Jersey. There was a base that was partially racked, still open, but actually went in and used part of it as is, but then went into other parts of old dormitories and renovated them to make them ADA compliant, as well as to open them up. And a number of families there. In fact, I visited there, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks back. I've lost complete track of time, but I visited a while ago, and there were some families already living there. Some of them actually took me into their apartment where they were living, and they thought it was great. They had a place for their pets to go to, and they had basketball courts, and they had tennis courts, and then there was 2 other buildings that were still in the process of completely being redone. And doing that was actually much cheaper than actually putting people up in hotels or other ways as well. So it actually turned into something very positive. I know that was done in New Jersey, and they had some good success with it there.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions from in the room? Okay, we'll go to the next question on the call. Operator, is there another question? Operator? Hello?
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And this next question is from Heidi of Orange County, California, GAFN Work Group. Your line is open.
Hey, Heidi.
Hi, I know that we've heard a lot of stories about people with disabilities who are on power-dependent equipment like respirators and TPN and things like that, who are reticent to evacuate and remain in their high-rise buildings, particularly in New York. Once, with extended power outages, this became a critical issue. One situation was solved by a group that got together that found marine batteries to be able to, which run longer, to be able to keep them charged. And they were like running these batteries up and down 18 flights of stairs. Has there been any thought to creating some kind of a power pack that can temporarily have a longer lifespan than something like that for situations where generators, individual generators, may not be feasible. A lot of these people are not willing to evacuate because you put them in a shelter situation and their immune systems or so forth are so compromised that they are more at risk than if they stay at home. And that's one of the things I think that would be nice to look at.
Heidi, thank you very much. And as a matter of fact, we did actually, one of our think tank calls a few months ago was down at Georgia Tech, specifically with the functional access needs community, and this topic came up, and we actually talked about that, and there was actually some solutions for better battery packs that a small group has. But I'm going to do two things. I'm going to throw it out as a challenge to a bunch of people in this room who are innovators to see, not necessarily come up with it now, but that's a real problem that needs a real solution that will affect really tens and hundreds of thousands of people. And I'm also I was going to do this later, but now's a good time. Dr. Nicole Laurie, who's the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response at the Department of Health and Human Services, is here. And Dr. Laurie.
Sure, thanks, Rich. It's great to be here and see so many creative and innovative people all together. We've recognized this as a pretty significant need the past couple of storms, and that's led us at HHS to do a couple things. One is to bring on to our staff an innovation fellow, and we decided to share that innovation fellow with FEMA because we make such common cause in this. So Frank Sanborn, the man in the yellow hat, is sitting right next to me, and he is working actively with me and with FEMA on this very issue. We've started what we're calling a health resilience technology program, which is really a program that we hope will stimulate the development and the spread of a whole host of technologies that will help power-dependent people stay at home. Whether it's longer-lasting batteries or a generator that doesn't give you carbon monoxide poisoning in your home, or as Frank and others are working on some signaling devices that can let somebody know when your battery life is low so they can get you a charge. To other things, I anticipate we'll be having some challenges and competitions later this year, and we are scouting the country, frankly the world, for really innovative ideas to solve this problem. So,
I'm assuming that you're also including the disability community within this conversation, as there's so many variables in terms of what equipment an individual is using.
Absolutely, and this think tank that Rich talked about was one that he and I did together. It was one of our early efforts to do some outreach to include this community, but through our agency for community living, which includes the Office of Aging, the Office of Disability, and others. We're joined at the hip both in this outreach, and I actually think that some of the really innovative solutions will come from that community.
Yeah. Thank you.
If I may add, this is Bill Bryan here from the Department of Energy. And I just want to mention an effort that we've worked with Health and Human Services on sensor technology. And I bring this out so the innovators have an understanding that this is out there now and how do we leverage this. This is the solution, but it could be part of the solution. And that we have installed sensors, or Health and Human Services has installed sensors in some of the critical locations. We have a lot of frankly, germs and viruses they will have to keep cold. They can't afford to let these things get warm, they have to keep the refrigeration on. So by having these sensors at these locations, we can tell instantaneously when they go on generator power or when they lose power, because it measures the variation on the grid. So we can tell if this system is plugged into your wall in a standard 110 outlet, and your facility either loses power or goes on generator power, we know, and we can map it. And we know where that sensor is located. And it may be a matter of at a relatively low cost. We've done this with the University of Tennessee and over the National Labs to develop these sensors. And it's going to be a capability where for $2,000, $1,500, maybe even cheaper, these things can be deployed at these critical locations in these homes where these people are on these life-saving systems. So we've got to indicate that they need somebody. At least make a call and say, "Did you turn the power off?" or "Why? How long can you go without help?" So on and so forth. So I throw that out.
Great, thank you. At this point, I want to change gears just a bit and shift to the next part of the call that's focused on the innovation team and the whole community. Soon after Sandy made landfall, FEMA collaborated with the innovation team led by Desi Patel Anderson, and then joined a little bit later, a couple of days later, by Ted Okada, who's in the back. That brought together a multi-sector, cross-functional group with a mission working with the whole community, government, nonprofit, international organizations, volunteer groups, businesses, and probably most importantly is concerned citizens. At the most basic level, the team is all about creatively solving problems by receiving individual input and connecting resources from a diverse spectrum of stakeholders. In other words, bringing a lot of you together. Members of the team are here today to discuss their involvement with Hurricane Sandy, their innovations and solutions. Throughout the conversation, I want to highlight the work that has been done, but also recognize that we're really only starting to scratch the surface on what innovation, this innovation team, and where we can go with quote-unquote innovation. A lot of good was done, but I really think we're just scratching the surface on this. We need to learn lessons from this group, really to provide and continue to strengthen our partnership with folks in the innovation community. Now we're going to discuss some of the work that innovation teams did with communications and mesh networks. To start the discussion, we have Jonathan Baldwin from the Open Technology Institute, Steve Birnbaum from the innovation team, and Frank Sanborn, who's the FEMA Health and Human Services Innovation Fellow, one that Dr. Lurie mentioned, the one that, again, we share. And Frank, somebody said on tweet here, he's a good guy, you know. He also said, Dr. Marcus, he gets it. So, you know, there's following various tweets here. I won't say what they're like. So this is actually, you know, it's both good, so I'd like to, at this point, turn it over to Jonathan. All right.
Morning, I'm Steve Birnbaum. I chair disaster response program for the Global DSAT Forum, in addition to my role in the innovation team. I'm also a first responder, a military firefighter in Rockville. FEMA's role of community concept is about empowering communities to help themselves after a disaster. Imagine you're trying to ask for help for yourself and your neighbors, but the people you're trying to speak with can't hear you or see you. The ability to communicate after a disaster is critical. About a week after Superstorm Sandy hit New York, our innovation team arrived in the Rockaways, one of the worst hit areas, to talk with those most affected and to understand what the challenges were. We met with two NGOs who were there working to help the local community, Team Rubicon and Command and Growth. We learned very quickly the lack of power, internet, and cellular coverage were affecting the survivors who wanted to be able to tell their loved ones that they were okay, to get assistance from FEMA or their insurance companies, and those who were trying to mobilize support for the community couldn't talk to any outside volunteers, suppliers, or donors. Rather than wait for the restoration of pre-existing communications networks, which were sustained significant damage, we acted as a bridge and worked to bring the community together with companies who wanted to help, with NGOs, volunteers, set up temporary disaster networks, starting at the St. Francis Church, which was a major focal point for resources for the population, for supply distribution, complete with high-speed satellite internet, Wi-Fi, and phones. That gave the volunteers who were operating there the ability to communicate. It was huge. And it gave the community the ability to support its own response on recovery. We then looked at FEMA's own disaster recovery centers, where they use large and expensive mobile communications vehicles to supply connectivity. There's a finite number of these vehicles, which was a limiting factor in how they could be deployed to the FEMA disaster recovery centers and to other locations that were important for FEMA where they wanted to support the community. So we expanded our solution to these locations, allowing FEMA to support a larger number of recovery centers. And we did this with an almost complete absence of the expected bureaucracy within the government, made possible by the enthusiastic support for innovation from senior government leadership. And we took these solutions, these you'd like the solutions, then copy it to some of the other locations.
Hi, I'm Frank Sanborn. I'm the Innovation Fellow working with Health and Human Services, the ASPR organization, and the Fema Emergency Office working with Ted and Desi. And I actually started a little bit earlier getting some involved in some conversations about disability iPads inside of the DRCs and how they're able to start augmenting some of the bandwidth needed to make those devices work really well for people coming in that need sign language interpretation and other services. So we started this concept of being able to deploy these satellite systems. That's one way to be able to do that. So as we hit the ground, as part of the innovation team, we're looking at what are these places to be able to set these up. We realized that communication along community organizations and community centers, as well as shelters, was a really important, not only mental health issue from the Health and Human Services side, but it was also basic communication for many different populations, and being able to just to reach out and let someone know that you're okay, or get a phone call to let other people know that you need help is really the ways that people can actively recover faster. We touched base with a lot of different organizations and communities. And one of these was a bunch of NGO and industry partners. And so we had ITDRC, which is a non-profit organization that was able to help bring some satellite systems in. And when we went up to some of the formal structures like the DRC, we saw that we had those different ways to do bandwidth. There, we met many people in the community and at the city level, and I realized that there were some great ways to facilitate some conversations so that the community would have some better access to bandwidth that could be very widespread. And one of these individuals is Jonathan Baldwin, who would like to introduce.
Sure. I'm Jonathan Baldwin from the Technology Institute, and I'm going to talk about the mesh networking we have at Portland before and after Sandy. There are two key takeaways from our work. The first takeaway is to get started before disaster hits. Network expansion was really effective after Sandy because we had been working with 20 slots at the Red Initiative for over a year before the disaster struck. We had nodes installed on rooftops of anchor institutions, had extra equipment on hand. We had already determined the best sites to expand to and contacted them so that we make it happen. So after Sandy, when Frank Sanborn and his team of volunteers came to Redmond, he was able to funnel his resources in the right direction. From the Redmond Initiative's leadership, we were able to rapidly expand the network over the weekend. So we need to make communities vulnerable to disaster aware of this technology beforehand, so they can build up their own local support system. My second key takeaway is that if you're responding to a disaster with or without mesh already in place, start by listening to what the community is already doing and tap into those informal communication networks that already exist. Meshnet might not be the answer, or it could be part of a larger conversation with the community. Frank and his team started by listening to the recognition and the Open Technology Institute's efforts in the area, which made their recovery work extremely effective, building a durable, resilient platform that's still used by the community today. It is being built upon further by funding from the city to pay young adults in the neighborhood to work on the network and educate others. And those are the two key takeaways so far.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve, Frank, and Jonathan. Appreciate that.
So actually, Frank, we do want to talk about one thing for the future that we're looking at. Okay.
Sure.
So we look at the future, the ability to understand where there's network coverage, where the carriers have cellular connectivity is an important need for the restoration for the population. So we've been working and looking at solutions that we can empower the community, empower the crowd to build maps, essentially a color-coded map that shows the type of connectivity, the level of connectivity. And we're working with a lot of the carriers. We may be able to make this happen within the next year even, so that next time there's a disaster, we know where to put these networks. We know where to locate the centers for recovery so that there already is connectivity there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We had over 820 calls on the phone, and just one of the comments from Twitter is from Vita. I can't say however it's spelled, but one of the tweets was, "Thanks for boosting the signal in Redbook. from somebody in Twitter land, so that's appreciated. So now, if there's an opportunity for any questions, either on the phone, again, *1 if you're on the phone, if you want to ask a question, or if there's anybody in the room that wants to ask a question of any of these folks, that'd be great. Any questions in the room? To ask you, if you want to ask a question, to go over to the microphone that's over by the door in the room, so people on the phone will be able to hear you. So, question in the room. If you just say who you are and where you're from, or just who you are.
Hi, I'm Willow. I'm not really from anywhere these days. What needs to happen with the balance between traditional communication groups, so official internet run by companies, and mesh networks? Because I know that it's harder in the States than it is in other places to keep your mesh networks up.
I think that would be for Frank, Jonathan, or Steve.
Well, I mean, in the Redmond community, we're working with a local ISP right now called Brooklyn Fiber. So in the past, we were doing some initial work with using a business internet connection that was not from a local ISP, and the local ISP has allowed us to, in our terms of service, it allows us to create open networks, which the other ISP would not. So basically that's what we're doing on that level, is just working with a more localized ISP that can do a custom, more personalized gateway. So, yeah.
Okay, great. And operator, is there anybody on the line that has a question?
Yes, sir. This question is from Michael Walters, City of Houston. Your line is open.
Hey, Michael.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello, how are you, Mike?
I'm doing great. This is a great conversation. It's something that we at the City of Houston are really interested in, particularly as you're discussing expanding the capabilities to more network connections. A lot of what we've been working on have, unfortunately, are very much tied to, as far as our public information is very much tied to network connectivity and availability. What are some of the tools that Fema is using to get information about these programs out? And I'll open this to all of those agencies involved, to the local jurisdictions who are at a high risk, obviously, for these types of natural disasters. Are there any programs or information that can be made available to some of the local jurisdictions? For instance, just down in Southeast Texas, we deal with hurricanes a lot. And some of the innovations, some of the new things that were developed and were visible during Superstorm Sandy are things that we'd be very interested in knowing about ahead of time, so that we're able to plan to be able to better collaborate with our state and federal partners when we respond.
Sure. A couple of things on that. First off is everything today is going to be online, and I'll give you that website at the end that you get all the information here. Plus, online, we have an after-action report that's being written up for this. But I think one of the more important things is what Jonathan mentioned is doing the work ahead of time. And a lot of work that people can do ahead of time that really made a big difference. And maybe Jonathan, you want to just touch on that again, on some of the things that was done ahead of time in order to help get the network back up.
Sure. We had installed nodes on key institutions, specifically, most importantly, the Redmond Initiative, which is a community center that provided a range of support after Sandy to the immediate area. And so having those nodes in place, some of them were connected to mesh, some were just kind of dormant at the time. And having equipment at Redmond Initiative already, mesh network nodes, as well as other networking equipment, and then also developing and strengthening social contacts with other institutions in the neighborhood that would be potential nodes in the future, really did make that a rapid process because it was very streamlined at that point.
Great, thank you. And question in the room?
Actually, it's more of a statement. My name is Joe Hillis. I'm with Operations Director of the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center. We're a nonprofit of IT professionals that help out throughout the country. And so we work with the innovation team throughout Sandy, particularly providing, we spent about 6 weeks on the ground providing technologies to the nonprofits and all. So my first thing is really I want to commend Jesse and the whole innovation team for exactly putting this thing together to Fema and just hope that you guys will certainly continue with that. You know, as you've heard today, and as you'll continue to hear, I mean, the tech community really did stand up to innovate through this, not only around the country, but around the world as well. So there's the corporate, there's the private, there's the formal and informal. So I think just to get my point across, it's really just to say that this is a program that's worth continuing on. It's a program that I think should really be invested in. I know that there's the NetGuard program was proposed back in 2002, and the Homeland Security Act is probably worth a look to keep that going, and maybe see how there could be some synergies between what this team is doing and whatnot. So again, my hats off to everybody, particularly the innovation team for having the department.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, we've got to move to the next topic, but we certainly can ask questions of anybody that's still here as we continue on. I'm just going to diverge from the script for a minute. Jerry Howe, are you on the phone?
I am, Rick.
Okay, this is Jerry Howe from the state of New York. He's the commissioner of the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, and I know, Jerry, if you have anything you wanted to throw in at this point?
No, it's been an interesting discussion, Rich.
Okay.
I don't know what topic you're going to talk about, but I'll listen.
Okay, great. Thanks. Next up, we have analytics and social media. And to share the stories, we have Christy Wilson from Splunk and Jason Linscott from Fema External Affairs.
Great. Thanks, Rich. So I think it's pretty apparent. This is Jason Linscott from Fema. For those on the phone, I think it's pretty apparent for us in the emergency management space how important it is to monitor social media and specifically to use it as a communication mechanism to reach those in the impacted area as well as those outside of the impacted area of the disaster. The communication out as well as the intake of social media information to inform better decisions by your organization, specifically disaster response organizations. There's a lot of really great uses that happened during Sandy. Specifically, I'll talk about one on the FEMA side that was pretty innovative for our communications group. Many people might be familiar with the FEMA rumor control initiative that we had online, where we had a small team of social media experts within the agency who were monitoring social media traffic on any given day and identifying rumors and misinformation that was being spread in real time. And we took that and we created a web page on FEMA.gov that was specifically designed to combat those rumors and the misinformation that we were seeing online. And to make very, very clear, simple statements about what was true and what was false related to those rumors. We then took that information and posted it on our social networks as well to get that information out. So one real-time example of how monitoring social media helped us get a better understanding of what the questions were on the ground and how we could be helpful. That's the real-time side of it. The other side of monitoring social media traffic is looking back after the event, analyzing what people have said, all that information that's out there online, taking it, making something useful out of it for the disaster response community. And that's why I'm excited that companies are starting to really look at this as an opportunity to learn and really to drive value in the humanitarian space. So with that, Christy Wilson from Splunk has been doing some great work analyzing social media data. So Christy, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. So I'm here today from Splunk, the Public Social Responsibility Program of Splunk. Splunk helps you analyze large data sets, search, report, and create some visualizations. Go to the next slide. Splunk was contacted by Willow, actually, right after Hurricane Sandy and asked for some help doing analysis of the community social media use opportunities for innovation in disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. We ended up looking at several different things, and we just walked through a couple of those today. Go to the next slide. The first we wanted to look at was an analysis of care data showing how scared people were. It's kind of interesting. The innovation group thought that this would not only help us understand what happened, but also how to connect a little bit better.
I don't need to interrupt you. Do me one favor, because there's 800 plus people on the phone that don't have a slide. If you can describe the slide.
Definitely. So what we're looking at on the slide is tweets over time that show things like I'm scared, and we're seeing a huge spike on the 28th. So it was fairly low on the 23rd, 24th, 25th, a gigantic spike on the 27th
either Jason or Christie, and to anybody else. Operator?
Thank you, sir. And this question is from Paula Ilengi from Bay Area Center for Regional Disaster. Paula, your line's open.
Thank you. This is a wonderful discussion here on the phone. Here's my question. There's a real need by local jurisdictions to be able to deal with regional disasters by having the situational awareness, decision support capabilities for restoring interdependent infrastructure. DHS, Infrastructure Protection Directorate, and DOE, some other agencies have some great capabilities that they've developed, which are largely for federal policymakers. Could we actually take those capabilities and local governments to work with their infrastructure and DHS and those federal agencies to develop the tools that they need to do that decision making? What I'm envisioning here is some pilot projects across the country that would be working towards that end.
Okay, I think there's some opportunity to actually throw that to anybody in the room.
Hey Paula, this is Bill Bryan. Nice hearing your voice. Haven't seen you in a while, but thanks for calling in. I agree with you, and one of the initiatives that we are looking to pursue from the Department of Energy, and one of the things that surfaced during my time out downrange is when I mentioned a lack of preparedness in the communities. There was still poor understanding within the communities of what their critical resources were and what their interdependencies were. And while we were going through the event, communities were gathered together to figure out where do they need power, where do they need generators, right? These are things that many of us in the federal government have been working with for a long time, and wrongly probably assumed that this was happening at several levels. We found it wasn't. So I think there are a lot of capabilities and tools that we have in the federal government that we do want to pass down and work with some of these communities in a pilot effort, so to speak, so they can be better prepared. And as I was sharing with the utility industry, let's just assume that a community has 10 substations feeding that community, and they have 10 critical nodes, whether it's a high-rise apartment building or hospitals or whatever the case may be. And in many cases, every one of those critical assets are tied to a separate substation. So if we're trying to harden substations and get those critical assets up and running faster, it would make sense to work the distribution grid to reroute those critical nodes to maybe 3 substations as opposed to all 10. And now you've got a priority of substations for restoration, you've got a priority of substations for hardening, and you have limited resources. And it all goes down to the communities understanding what those nodes are they need up and the interdependencies that they have. So we intend to work with communities to do some of that.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Bill. It's music to our ears.
Okay, great. Thank you. And a question for Twitter for Chrissy. Chrissy, I'm sorry. Any insights or correlations regarding people who are not tweeting that have evacuated, that Splunk has? So any correlations for people who aren't tweeting, and maybe any correlations to people who did?
That's a great question. The source of the data that we analyze is from Twitter, so it's a little challenging to make analysis on data that doesn't exist. But if people in the room or on the call have interesting data sets related to that, please find me later. We'd be super interested to do some additional analysis on other data and related inside of the same project.
Okay, great. And again, if anybody in the room has a question, if you could go by the microphone, that'll make it easier, and I'll go to the operator.
Hey, Rich?
Yes.
Rich, it's Jerry. Before you take the next question.
Go ahead, Jerry.
You know, there's a lot of discussion here, and by the way, this is a terrific call. A lot of good information. A lot of discussion about using texting and social media. We found during Sandy that as soon as the power went out, texting and social media was pretty useless. But what we did find out is that good communication with local radio and TV stations is enduring and will last beyond the wireless communication. So I think it's important not to become over-dependent on wireless because it's so vulnerable, and that we have the relationships with local media to get the word out even after the incident occurs. Because most people have radios in their cars or portable, and we were able to get a lot more out that way once everything died than we were through social media.
Okay, I'd like to actually, that those who don't know, that was again Terry Howe, who's the Commissioner for the State of New York Division of Homeland Security Emergency Services. And Jerry, I'm actually going to throw that out and see if anybody in the room has any comments on that one way or the other. So, on this particular one, Jerry said yes, and just say who you are.
Hi, it's Kat Graham, and I'm with Humanity Road. We come online and monitor social media for emerging trends and people who are trapped or isolated in their discussions in social media. So yes, while traditional media holds a really strong impact on the public and should be used, new media also has that opportunity to provide some insight and information. Because even though power goes out, their devices still last quite a while, so people can text message, often in a disaster, even when voicemails go down. So we do see the need for both.
Great, so I think that's a good point, is need for both. And Steve, I'll get to you in 1 second. I just want to let people know that there's still a lot of people on the call, still obviously a lot of activity on Twitter, so we're going to actually extend the call for a little bit longer. We're supposed to end at 1:30. If people have to leave, I understand that, but we decided we're going to extend the call because people are interested. So, Steve, we're flexible.
Just to expand on what Jerry and Cam said, one of the things that we observed on the ground was that in a lot of areas where there was a lack of communications, Jerry, you're right that sometimes the messaging of the needs didn't necessarily get out. But what we found was that volunteers who were, especially ad hoc volunteers, would go into some of the worst hit areas during the day, observe whatever they observed and try to help people, and would actually come back out of the impacted areas and start tweeting in the evening. And that actually circles back to some of the rumor control issues. Because a lot of the time the tweets that we saw circulating, spreading some of the rumors, were not first-hand accounts. Sometimes they were second-hand accounts, many hours removed.
Sure, understood.
Great, thank you very much. And I'm going to keep this going to the, I'm sorry, in the room we have I know we got them online. Go ahead.
This is John Crowley from the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative at National Defense University. I was on the innovation team that went to Sandy. I wanted to comment on the social media and the radio. What's been happening internationally has been using the radio in order to ask questions that come back via social media and create a feedback loop. What I'd encourage people to think about is mix the channels. We have Legos to play with, as Mr. Reed had said. Now that we have it, let's try and use what's being done internationally and use some of these models back at home.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Avery Bob. I work for an organisation called Disaster Tech Lab. We come over from Ireland, working in Sandy, because I'm affected by Humanity Road, who we had worked with in Haiti before. What we do, we provide disaster communications, mostly using Wi-Fi and mesh networks, which we deployed in this case in the Rockaway area. I'm kind of covering the previous topic about mesh networks and communications and the social media, because one of the things that we do with our Wi-Fi and our mesh networks, we don't just provide connectivity for disaster responders. It also has become more and more important to actually provide connectivity for people who live in disaster-hit areas, because two things, as Twitter and Facebook, a lot of information from on the ground is fed back into disaster response organizations who can then use that data. Once it's basically been analyzed and validated, we can use that to actually coordinate the response. And in that case, also going on the topic that's been discussed earlier today and probably again tonight, today, is the whole thing about gathering data, be it data in the cloud or data on the ground. It's a very important thing to do, but what's more important is actually make sure that the people who need that have access to data. One of the things that happened in the Rockaways, for instance, in Staten Island after Sandy, is that there were 4 or 5 different organizations at different times going door to door gathering information, building that into a database, but nobody but that organization was actually given access or was using that database, and the people who lived in the areas that were hit by Sandy were getting quite frustrated because they were asked again and again for the same information, but no action was taken. So it's important really to use that data and then feed that to the different organizations. And that's something that we put up with other groups in the innovation team also in previous discussions, is that it's really important to build not so much a big cloud in the sky where you put all your information, but actually create a local cloud into this asset area that can plug into the Wi-Fi mesh network, that even if there's no backhaul, because backhaul is a big issue if even the cellular networks and the landlines are down and satellite backhaul is at a premium, if you can actually plug a local NAS device, a big hard disk, for lack of better words, into the network and make sure that every organization working there has access to the data.
No, I think it's a great point. I think that there's a lot of data. What do we do with that data, and how are we going to take that data and actually use it? And we're actually going to be talking about that in a few minutes as we move forward. Just one quick question that came on Twitter in regards to some of the information Splunk put up. Somebody said, I'm scared and I need to evacuate and have that information. It's a challenge to figure out how relevant that is to everything in the emergency management that emergency management is focused on. So, just sort of, does anybody want to take a shot at how, like, paraphrasing this is, you know, having that information that you mentioned is neat, but how is that going to help emergency management? And Mike, just introduce yourself, Mike.
Sure, I'm Mike Barnum, Federal Coordinating Officer from New York. I want to know that information, and if we could even geocode it, it tells me where my problems are. And it tells me where I can sort of, if I have like resources that are flowing into the area, we can adjust on the fly and send them to the places where we see more impact. So all information is good, and it allows us to shape our response.
Okay, great.
And this is Michael Wild from Splunk. When we were looking at the analysis on tweets, one of the things Jason brought up is the concern for mental health. So that's why the feeling and scared and mad about something is relevant, because we know people are without food, but then the lasting effect is how does it really impact them? What kinds of skills do you need to have on the ground to deal with some people that are just totally scared and don't know what to do, even if you give them resources?
One more quick comment is that some of the other things that we looked at that weren't in the material stage due to time was also what resources people were sharing related to preparedness, right? So allowing you to see whether the things that you put out from FEMA or from other sources were effective. People actually shared those. If they were sharing other things, and then you might want to look and see what those resources have that other resources did not.
Great, thank you very much. And just to keep it moving, and again, we can ask questions on any of these as we continue on. As we move to the next part, in December, we had the opportunity to engage in a creative exercise with our friends from Frog Design in New York City. We brainstormed some ideas about, how we approach our disaster recovery centers in the community. And to talk about the results of the workshop, Dino Sanchez is here, and Laura is, I think, going to be on the phone as well from Frog Design. So, Dino.
Hi, I'm Dino Sanchez. I'm an Associate Creative Director at Frog Design in New York. As Rich mentioned, we've been collaborating with the innovation team for the past 6 and 7 weeks on a concept called the Community Disaster Recovery Center, CDRC. It's very conceptual at this point. As Rich mentioned, it's still scratching the surface, but it is an ideal. And ideals are the goals that we like to work with. And essentially, the baseline of this is it's empowering communities to expedite their own DRCs as efficiently and immediate as possible after a disaster strikes, so they can at least address their informal needs prior to FEMA's arrival to address their formal needs. So how do we do this? Firstly, is to establish partnerships with franchises with a nationwide presence, so that can be anywhere from Starbucks to a Dunkin' Donuts. We saw a little spark of that with the IKEA and Redbook, so we know that this can actually happen. And the nice thing about having these franchises as a model is that it's very widespread, and again, it's very efficient and immediate. So again, we'd like to preemptively equip communities with the frameworks and guidelines to set up their own DRCs, establish point of contacts within the community, because we really feel that communities are better suited to address their local needs as immediately as possible. We saw that with groups such as Occupy Sandy, Rebuild Staten Island, goal of this is very survivor-centric. That's the goal of this entire initiative. So it's really to build those things as immediately and efficiently as possible.
Great, thank you. And Laura?
I think you're on a sign off.
Oh, okay. Okay. So any questions, anybody in the room specifically for Dino, or continuing questions from previous? Operator, do you have any questions on the phone?
Yes, sir. And this question is from Bob Kaplan of College, New York. JCRC, your line is open, Bob.
Hi, how you doing? And I want to thank you for bringing together all these folks. The thing show is in such an innovative way and allowing us to rethink and re-understand all this stuff. I want to build upon something Jerry Howard talked about before. Our reliance upon, our strict reliance upon one brand of technology or media or another. I want to put another one on the table, that's ethnic media. There are so many different populations that don't speak English, that don't tap into the online media in English, or that do tap into online media at all. And the ethnic media has been an essential tool for reaching into these populations and allowing them to get up-to-date information, deal with the rumor mill, particularly around the fears and anxieties of ethnic populations and different immigrant populations. But I want to ask one question. I know that in Red Hook, there is some tension between different segments of the population there, and there may be certain parts of the population have more of a proclivity to work with online avenues than other segments of the population. Did you find that once you were able to reestablish the online connectivity in that community and work on the various coalitions and opportunities to build partnerships on a localized level, that you were able to reach into certain populations that have less of a proclivity or an understanding of how to use Twitter or any of the various online media?
Bob, this is Rich, and I think that you're raising a great point about not just the ethnic media, but one thing about New York, which is, New York. And it's made up of many different neighborhoods, and then within each neighborhood, within each borough there's neighborhoods, and then within neighborhoods there's smaller neighborhoods. And I know there was quite an initiative that went on there, and I don't know if either Mike or Jeff want to touch on the neighborhood initiative and other things that were done.
I think the power there came from connecting early on with the way we set up the geographic organization with the informal leaders. The formal leaders were communicating already, but to cross that hurdle that you identified, and it's clearly a challenge, is when we got to the informal leaders, the religious groups, the community centers, the community activists, and even school boards and things like that. And when we got them to start connecting and start paying attention to our information flow, then the rest of the community would follow. But it's an area we need to do more work.
So we have been working on coalition building here in New York for almost 20 years now, and have developed these kinds of initiatives around the city, particularly on a community-based level, working with the multi-stakeholders. And I know that you're absolutely right. There's more work that can be done up front, allowing these other leaders to feel a part of the decision-making process and to speak their language, so to speak, even if that language may be English or not, is a very, very important challenge that we need to meet. Because these are populations that we're still interfacing with that still don't have the right information, still don't feel connected, and also don't feel part of the decision-making process. So the more work we can do to make the kind of efforts out there inclusive and learning about what your needs are of these particular populations, the better. And again, I want to thank everyone for thinking out of the box on all this stuff.
Okay, Bob, thank you. And I dealt with this when I was back in Boston quite a bit. It's a significant issue. We actually had many ways that we dealt with it in the community. Dr. Laurie, the Assistant Secretary of Care and responsible HHS. Dr. Laurie.
Thanks. I just want to throw out a question to Bob and to others. Often children or certainly people under 18 are the only English speakers in their family. And we've had a lot of discussion about children and youth as responders. Have any of you had experiencing mobilizing youth in this way? Because they're much more tech-savvy than many of us. And particularly to reach into non-English speaking communities in this through social media.
Yeah, I mean, not, I think the age you're identifying, like the, middle school, maybe elementary level, which is, we do see that. We have them bringing their family into the DRCs, and we use whatever, we are using technology to level that, because sometimes we'll have an iPad to do translation for us. We had 25 languages, that we were putting stuff in, but we haven't done that. I think that's a great idea. We can do more in that area.
What are the media companies, social media companies here?
Any of the social media companies or anybody in the room want to comment about the innovation? As we're taking a moment as people are walking over to the microphone, just so people on the phone have a sense, we're able to actually get, go ahead, identify yourself.
Hi, thank you. Chris Fabian from UNICEF. I'm the advisor on innovation to Anthony Lake. And I think that the question about youth is really important. We've been working a lot with FEMA to figure out how we can structure some of the work that we're doing in some of UNICEF's program countries, young people and engaging them after disasters, to create really strong networks. Because it's clear that not only are they most in need and most affected by emergencies, but also they can be that backbone of building back. And so I think one exciting thing that we're going to be announcing soon, but I guess we can put it on Twitter now, is that we're going to be creating a small team in New York to take some of the innovations that UNICEF has been building with young people in South Sudan and Central African Republic, and try to get them into some of the workflow in the U.S. and in parts of the developed world. And I can give you some more information on that.
And Chris, I think you raised a good point. Is one of the things is the innovation and things that UNICEF has been doing for years worldwide, and things that FEMA may have been doing for years worldwide. I think one of the things that I like that's happened out of this is the fact that we are linking together to look at things that you've done around the world that we're going to be able to do, and vice versa. So I think that's one thing that certainly has come out of this as well. At this point, I'm going to move on. Come back, and for people in the room, I just want to let people in the room know that we're going to have another hour and a half of a round table to really get into this. So I'm going to move on to the next topic and then take more questions from the phone, because I want to make sure that we balance this as well. Next, I want to introduce Deb Ingram, the Assistant Administrator for Recovery at FEMA. She'll discuss some of the disaster recovery centers and the survivor experience. Deb?
Great, thank you, Rich. Good afternoon, everyone. So pleased to be here today. This disaster provided us with really an opportunity to rethink how we do disaster recovery centers. These are accessible facilities, usually fixed facilities, but they can be mobile facilities where disaster survivors can go to get information about FEMA or other types of disaster assistance programs, or just to ask questions. And as I said in the past, we've used traditionally brick and mortar for our disaster recovery centers. That did not work in this event at all, particularly in New York, because of the extended power interruption and gas shortages. There were a lot of people who were just afraid to leave their homes because their homes had been compromised. They were afraid to leave, that somebody might come in and take their things. And there really is such a sense, again, in New York, this sense of neighborhood, that we found that people weren't coming to us, we needed to go to them. And so working with the innovation team, we were able to develop a creative way to get to disaster survivors in their community, on the streets where they were. We utilized roving DRC teams, and Steve, you talked about this earlier, getting in, moving, finding more creative ways, not just our traditional vehicles that we use for these mobile centers, but other ways to do it. And it was everything from a couple of people walking the streets and spending time in a Starbucks or whatever location in the community, to actually moving centers around and going to places in the community or in the neighborhoods where maybe people would come, to special events where they would come, and then we could be there to register them for assistance, to answer their questions, to provide them the support that they needed. I think I'll go back to the question earlier. Rob was talking about getting people involved in the neighborhoods, and it really is important for us, and it's something we're really going to focus on as we move ahead, to reach into those neighborhoods, contact those informal leaders, to understand their citizens and what the needs are, find out where we need to go, so that we can bring our services to the survivors instead of them coming to us. We could have done this without Secretary Napolitano talked earlier about the FEMA Corps and the DHA's surge capacity. That was critical to to our ability to do this because we had to have so many people out there and doing it. And then all of the work that we talked about earlier today about the technology, and I know Mike and Ben are going to talk about it a little bit, so I won't get into that. But this was really a combination of use of technology and non-technological solutions to be more creative, to find ways to support disaster survivors. And it's certainly something that we are going to bring into our processes and routine way of doing business moving forward. We will be adapting and setting up more teams who can go into those hardest hit, less accessible areas, make sure we have mobile registration options for people who need them the most, and that we're coordinating again with the whole community. We're getting into the neighborhoods, talking to those informal leaders, talking to the voluntary organizations who are in those communities so well, and letting them help us help the disaster survivor. So it's, Desi talked about the community disaster recovery centers, kind of getting those started. We're also going to be working on that, kind of thinking of a disaster recovery center toolkit concept that we can put out there for people. I think it was Paul who asked earlier about infrastructure and how can we better understand what we have, what infrastructure is up, what isn't, and how we can plan. I think this really all points to pre-disaster planning. Jonathan talked about that, getting together in your community before something happens, knowing where your resources are, thinking about the places, the opportunities that you might have, whether it's for disaster recovery centers or getting your infrastructure back up. And if you have this conversation and you're doing that planning in advance of the disaster, that's really going to make your recovery, your response, and your recovery effort so much more successful. So, Rich?
Great, thanks, Devin. If there's any questions on the phone that we'll take from Devin, I think one thing that Deb mentioned is looking at the DRCs and disaster recovery centers. We're also looking at CR, which we're going to touch on in a minute. But some of the things that come out of the innovation team is actually the innovation team and the innovation that's happening all around us is actually transforming the way that we, FEMA, are doing business. So a lot is coming out of it. So at this point, I'm going to go to the operator to see if there's a question on the phone.
Thank you. Yes, Chris Lamore of the New Orleans Regional Planning Commission. Your line is open, Chris.
Yes, we're the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the New Orleans, Southeast Louisiana area, and we have an emergency preparedness public-private partnership that's focused primarily on providing private sector resources to support emergency management in this region down here. My question goes back to the communications issue. I was just wondering if FEMA or any others have looked at because we do have a member of our group that is a ham operator, and he works with various ham operators in the region to utilize that as a kind of a backup or redundancy in the time frame of communications when things may be down, where they can be tied in with the emergency operation centers. Just kind of a question and a thought.
No, it's actually a great question, and believe it or not, actually one of our early think tank calls in San Francisco, we actually talked about new technologies, and what came out of the new technologies was to go back to the old technology, specifically the amateur radio operators, and to utilize the amateur radio operators. And again, because of that, we've actually started a conversation in all of our, I'm struggling to remember the acronym that we have for all of our communications in each one of our regions. Just blank on it. Areas. No, it's not races, areas. It's a committee group. But anyway, there's a group of folks that meet in each region to talk about communications issues, and through that is actually bringing together in all the regions the local amateur radio operators, actually how key they are. And I'm going to diverge for a minute, go back to my previous life in Boston. We were for the Boston Marathon, the 4th of July, and a number of other times. We actually used the amateur radio operators in what we call special events and planned disasters to get them used to working during special incidents and special events, but then utilize them in disasters as well, because they're one form of communications that will constantly work. So again, thank you for that. Appreciate it. And operators, another call?
Yes, sir. We have a question from Ed of Iowa Poison Center. Your line is open.
Thank you. One innovative healthcare resource 24/7 to local, state, federal resources. There's waiting centers for every state and national level of the American Association of Voice Control Centers that is available as a resource during disasters. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the information, Ed. And at this point, I'm going to move on and start the next part of the conversation. And next story is going to be about FEMA Corps, and I have Mike Byrd, who's the FEMA Federal Coordinating Officer in New York, and joining him is FEMA Corps member Ben Barron, and for a couple of people that are making comments about the way that I say New York, oh well. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mike, who is, not only the Federal Coordinating Officer from New York, but he also happens to be from New York, and that's, one of the things you have to deal with. With this power without a shot.
Thanks, Rich. And first, as the Federal Coordinating Officer in New York, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the innovation team for jumping in with both feet. You guys made a real difference, and I'm grateful for it. One of the things that I think that FEMA is able to leverage is we have pretty strong and robust back-end systems that are able to take in and push out assistance. And part of the reason we're able to have such success is that we're 90 or 100 days in now, and we're close to $900 million that have been able to be pushed out as a result of the intake that we were able to do. We would not have been able to do that level and speed and velocity of intake had we not had the networks in place that you guys helped expand. Nor if we didn't have the tip of the spear work that the surge capacity and the FEMA Corps. So I'm grateful for that. The survivors are grateful for that. But to talk about how that was done and how the guys at the tip of the spear were doing it, I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thanks, sir. My name is Ben Barron. I'm a AmeriCorps and CCC FEMA Corps team leader, and I worked in conjunction with Lauren DiLoretto on this project in order to innovate. Initially, the FEMA Corps teams began with the Community Relations Mission. And the AIR initiative was to assess, inform, and report was our initial initiative. And that lasted roughly 3 weeks. This allowed members of the team to build bonds with communities as well as assess what were the community's issues, what were their capabilities, and really what resources were needed in that area. Also, we were assessing critical needs. And we were making note of areas and neighborhoods that needed more support, as well as compiling information on survivors' distance from the more traditional brick-and-mortar type disaster recovery centers. The teams, the community relations teams, were disseminating information regarding registration and location of the traditional DRCs, as well as the idea of the roving or the mobile disaster recovery centers and being able to relocate them into areas that needed them. So essentially the teams would serve a dual purpose. We would carry out the community relations mission of informing and creating a presence, as well as utilizing technology at the roving disaster recovery centers to register survivors as well as check the status of survivors who had yet to register, or who had already registered. The capability to register survivors on site was critical because many people lost the technology to register themselves as a result of damage from the hurricane or due to the fact that they had no electricity. As well, they're being able to be mobile and move into neighborhoods that needed that type of assistance was critical because many people lacked transportation. There were damage to vehicles, there was a gas shortage, as well as this, many people didn't want to leave their neighborhoods immediately after the hurricane. I'm sorry, after Sandy. We were able to utilize the roving DRC because we were able to respond in a very short time frame. We utilized communications equipment, mobile data networks, as well as laptops with tethered devices and the iPads, which I'll go into a little bit more later on. The FEMA Corps force performing both the community relations and individual assistance functions had the equipment and the ability to operate technology, which aided in efficiently registering those who may have been unable to travel to the DRCs for reasons I mentioned earlier. And the introduction of the iPads made those roving DRCs even more mobile because we were able to register, in some cases, people at their front door. Now, we had that option with the BlackBerries. However, initially, phone lines had such an influx of people trying to register that some people, the wait times were long. So people were able to register via iPad as an alternative. Also, in terms of reporting back, the iPads had the capability to report on the areas hardest hit and compile information from teams in various locations in real time. Also, they allowed for reporting of how many survivors had been served, as well as what areas needed more concentration by the broken DRG. Thank you.
Thank you. And some of the innovations that happened at Sandy, Ben may or may not realize that he was part of like 6, as he just mentioned, everything from FEMA Corps to the way they were deployed, to how they were deployed, to where they stayed, to the work that they were doing, to utilizing the iPads, to DRCs, and a lot of the information that we got from FEMA Corps, which is made up of 18 to 24-year-olds, is really, again, helping shape as we move forward. At this time, I'd like to go to the operator if there's questions on the phone, or if there's any questions in the room as well. Operator?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This question is from the inbox sheriff, Brooklyn Prison Office. Your line is open.
Hello. I just want to say that I think this conversation is so relevant and so much needed, and I thank FEMA for conducting this. But I wanted to, actually my question was way back in regards to the comments that Jerry Howell was making, and as a result, through the conversation, most of my points were addressed. So, but I do want to talk about the DRCs and in regards to community DRCs. I think that's a great idea. But what I have found is a lot of community groups that have banded together to try to do outreach along with FEMA to residents who were sick or shut in, and keeping the information. They said that they thought that they could share that information between FEMA and themselves of the people that they had on their record, so that they could also provide services to those residents. Because, along with FEMA, there were many organizations providing food, they were providing clothes, they were providing dehumidifiers, they were providing carbon monoxide detectors, they were providing so much. But I wanted to see more of a connection between the information of the database of people who needed assistance with these other groups, and will that be happening in the future?
Well, I think that's one of the keys. I'm guessing you're going to turn it over to Jeff to answer that, Jeff?
Absolutely, yes, that is something that we're working on, and it's in an area in this event, we had a lot of people coming in, a lot of traditional monitoring agencies providing assistance, but a lot of people coming in, that weren't the traditional, the locals, and keeping track of all of that and understanding where the needs are and how to move things is quite a challenge. It is something that we're looking at. We want to look at how we use the technology, how we do something with the data, as somebody asked earlier. We have something, we have a National Master Council where we work across a broad spectrum of folks who work in emergency management, and one of the things that we're going to ask them to do, continue to ask them to do, is to help us figure out how to do this, so that we can better make decisions about where to disperse the supplies that are needed and make sure that they get to the right places. So it's definitely an issue where we can do that.
Great. And the good question is how we're going to continue to, as we build the community centers and we build to work with the community disaster recovery centers, and how we're linking that into the services that are available both at the community level, at the state and federal level, and how we're linking those together. And I think that, some of the things we've seen and learned, and people here in this room and other folks have actually given us some great suggestions as to how we're going to take that and move that forward. I'm going to take another question in a minute, but just a couple of things from Twitter. This goes back to a question a little while ago about the concept of mobilizing youth. Is to do translation is interesting, and as Noah said, I did this on the ambulance many years ago, and as he was saying that earlier, I was thinking the exact same thing. I had done that for many, many years, and Mike nodding his head, he did that as well. So it's something that, again, it's something that I think how we can engage the youth going forward is going to be great. And for the Ohio Disaster Dad, there will be transcripts of this will be available afterwards. They'll be on the website that they'll be available for folks. And one question on the phone, and we'll come right to you, Steve. Question on the phone, operator?
Yes, sir. This is from Al Romanowski of the Maryland Department of Health. Your line is open now. Sir, please check your phone to see if it's muted. Mr. Romanowski, your line is open, sir.
Okay, well, we're waiting. Steve?
Sure. Speaking of information and making that available, there's a project that John Crowley from our innovation team spearheaded through Camp Roberts and his work at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative to use Civil Air Patrol to take aerial imagery after a disaster. And that was put online. The community was asked to essentially vote on the scale of the damage visible in any given picture. And through this crowdsourced mechanical turf, FEMA was able to take the imagery without putting any analysts on it, just relying on the public, on the crowd, was able to determine where the worst areas were, create a map that helped to direct where the most resources were needed. That's information that is already publicly available, and it can be put to a number of other uses. For example, some of the telcos, the carriers, they can use that same imagery to determine where their infrastructure is worst hit, where they need to prioritize. So they don't even need to get their survey teams out. So there's a lot of information that people may not be aware of, and I think we need to work to make sure there's better awareness of what information is already out there that can be shared, and as the caller said, to try to share more information.
Okay, great. And at this point, I think we're going to start to wrap it up. We've gone way over the time that we had allotted for this. It was supposed to be an hour and a half, but we went 2 hours. And just want to take a minute to really, thank everybody that's here. I mentioned the transcript will be available, and that in audio will be made available at www.fema.gov/thinktank. Also, really want to thank all of our presenters for providing insight to their ideas, and look forward to continuing the conversation and the willingness to share the ideas and the conversation with a lot of people. The secretary, when she heard about this, she wanted to come. She was very interested in this. Richard Reed, when he heard about it, wanted to come. People are very interested and want to hear what people have to say about innovation, and not just talk about it. What's important about people in this room and people that have been on the phone is that people are doing it, and that's a big difference, and to see the results from that. As I mentioned earlier, the things that we've seen, heard, learned from all of you and many others are actually helping us to look, not necessarily some from today, but mainly from what was done, is how we're going to continue to move forward. The conversation doesn't end here. It can, and I hope it continues online. It can be found again at www.fema.gov/FEMA-think-tank. It can be done as well. Right now, just to give a sense, we had over 800 plus people on the phone. We've had 63,000 Twitter accounts were reached. 1,200 tweets, but that was about a hour ago or so. And the Prezi that's being put together will also be available online for people to look at. For those people who don't know what a Prezi is,